Is anyone else starting to think that Jurassic Park is actually a non-fiction story? Remus, Romulus, and Khaleesi are direwolves that were brought back to life. The last direwolf left our world 13,000 years ago at the end of the Pleistocene era, or something like that. I'm probably saying it wrong, and I apologize. But it really leads us to a lot of questions about what's right and wrong when it comes to our scientists and our brains of this world potentially playing the role of God. If you look at these puppies, they look like cute little polar bears. They're so adorable, right? But here's the thing. You and I are thinking these are adorable little puppies, and they are. But what if I told you this didn't happen today? These guys were born 7 months ago, which means they've been holding this from us for quite a while, or at least I feel like they have. Maybe there was some, science publications that spoke about them, right? But I didn't hear about this just till a couple days ago, and I'm assuming most of you guys are in the same boat. They went to a museum where they had a dire wolf skull that was like 50 to 70,000 years old, and they took a bone right behind the ear. I forget the name of the bone. Let's see if I wrote it down. The petrous bone. It's that big bone right behind the ear. A lot of mammals and humans have that bone, and apparently Colossal Biosciences, they got permission from a museum who had a 50 to 70,000 year old dire wolf skull. They had a tooth that they got from the La Brea tar pits. Where the bone in the museum was 50 to 70,000 years old, the tooth from the La Brea tar pits in California was only about 12,000 years old. If you take the 70,000 year old skull, the petrous bone, and you take that 13,000 year old tooth, right, the canine tooth, then all of a sudden you have two of the same animal that have enough difference in their timeline that they probably got a couple of different adaptations throughout the years. So they were able to take that DNA, throw it through their AI models, and figure out how to create, or I should say, recreate a la Dr. Frankenstein. They were able to recreate these animals. And while they're cute as hell, and I'm sure they're just gonna basically be like a regular wolf, right? So I don't think they're necessarily gonna bring the end of the world, but super interesting stuff. It really makes you wonder, are we gonna be able in the future to have people live forever? Because imagine if one of your family members or friends perishes, and then you're able to just take their DNA and make a brand new them. A copy, of course, but still. It'll probably act like them in most ways, shapes, or forms. Imagine if you could double yourself, put that double on the other side of the world where they lived in completely different circumstances. I wonder what that sociology would do to create a different you. Wouldn't that be crazy? Mala, could you imagine? You've got you there in the Massachusetts area, but imagine if there was another Mala in Sweden, Antarctica, the Congo. Oh my God, Mala. What would you be like if you were raised in the Congo? That's amazing. So the animal, the direwolf, was made famous by the very popular series Game of Thrones, which, by the way, a lot of people get shocked when I tell them I've never ever tasted or drinking coffee. I have tasted it, but I've never drinking more than a sip or two of coffee in my life. And that shocks a lot of people. But what perhaps shocks people even more about me is I've never watched a single episode of the Game of Thrones. I just don't really get interested in that stuff at all. And I'm sure there's one or two of you that haven't watched it either. There's at least one of you, right? Anyway, this wolf went extinct 13,000 years ago. It was brought back to existence, like I said earlier, by this company called Colossal Biosciences. They retrieved DNA from the fossils of a dire wolf, edited 20 genes of gray wolves, put the dire wolf into the gray wolf, and then voila. I think if you're going to bring back any animal, it's got to be incredibly adorable. And I think there's one thing that can be said about these 3 wolf pups. They are adorable. Are they wolf pups or wolf cubs? I'm not sure. You guys let me know down below. They now have plans to bring back the woolly mammoth. By the way, dogs and wolves are so smart, they're able to adapt so well that when experts ask themselves, why did the dire wolf go extinct in the first place, they believe that it was actually a situation where their food sources kind of died out, therefore their numbers depleted, and then ultimately they went extinct. I love watching Glenn Beck. Carla, you like watching Glenn Beck. There's a couple of us that do. One of the things that Glenn Beck brought up on his show today regarding the dire wolf that I thought was kind of scary, yet incredibly cool and interesting, is one of the people or one of the organizations that actually invested in the company that was creating these dire wolves is actually the CIA. He brought up the question that could these advances that they're doing by bringing back these extinct species of animals, could that actually be used in a militarious way, did I say that right? In a military way, to enhance human capabilities? God, could you imagine if they ever had a human being that had the ability to run like a cheetah? Like literally like a cheetah? As a matter of fact, there are some freaks of natures out there where you'll see somebody and their parents are both slow, non-athletic people, and some way, somehow, their child becomes this sprinting machine, and it just makes you wonder, are they already doing some scientific experimentation that we don't know about? Here's a quick question for you to ponder. You love sports. You and your wife have a baby boy, and your wife is pregnant with your son. He's not even born yet. And a doctor and a scientist come up to you and your wife, and they explain to you that if you would like, they could actually infuse some DNA into your unborn child so that when he comes out, he'll actually be the equivalent of an Olympic athlete. Now, I'm not saying that can be done, but I'd imagine it's not impossible, right? If you can bring back the dire wolf, who knows what we can do? Who knows what we can do? Sky's the limit. So here's the question. Would you go ahead and have them alter your child's DNA so that as they grow up, they look just like you and your spouse, like they normally would? The only difference is they've got the athleticism of an Olympic athlete. Could you imagine such a thing? I guarantee you that even if you and your spouse would never do it, I guarantee you there's some people that probably would. I was watching these videos, and I'm sure you've seen them too, where they'll have people that have video cameras out in the middle of nowhere, out in Australia, Madagascar, just out in these really areas where there's hardly any people. And you know as well as I do, they find pictures of Bigfoot all the time. But the other day I was watching a video and they showed something that kind of looked like the dodo bird. Have you ever heard of the thylacine? You know, the Tasmanian tiger? The thylacine has been extinct for what, 50, 60, 70 years? But every couple of years you'll see somebody and they'll have one of these cameras out in the wilderness and they'll take pictures of the thylacine. And we think, oh my God, it's a miracle. They've been hidden, and some way, somehow, they've continued. Even though we thought they were extinct, they're really not extinct. And every year, by the way, they find a handful of species that they thought were extinct, and then they end up finding out they're not. But here's the question I have for you, Venters. What if they really did go extinct? What if we just have a lot of weird, crazy scientists that are bringing back these species, right, back to the planet Earth? And what if they're actually taking them to these really uninhabited areas of the world and they're actually restarting them without letting anybody know? If you saw a thylacine, right, a Tasmanian tiger, you would just naturally think, oh my God, I saw a 1 in a billion event. I saw an extinct animal that's back. But for all you know, it could be one of Dr. Moreau's beasts on some island that the military's messing with. My thought is they have these 3 wolf pups growing up. By the way, they're already 80 pounds. They're only 7 months old and they're already 80 to 90 pounds apiece. And they're gonna get about 120 to 150 pounds apiece. That's a pretty big dog, right? That's a pretty big wolf. They're out there on a 2,000 acre preserve. And when they said this, I couldn't help but think, holy shit. You know how a lot of times there's people that believe that conspiracy, that the bad guys of this world actually tell us the truth? They just tell it to us in a veiled way. Well, it got me thinking, who's to say that Jurassic Park is actually a nonfiction? And think about that for a second. If they can bring back anything, then they can probably bring back everything. Now, in Jurassic Park, the movie, and by the way, I haven't watched, part 50, but I did watch the first part, part 1 and part 2. But I remember in part 1 that the way they bridged the gap was they used frog DNA. So if you remember, they got to a point where these sterile animals were actually able to multiply the same way frogs do, right? They'll eventually change their sex and they'll eventually find a way. You remember in that movie, they said life finds a way. I find all this stuff fascinating. I wish I was a scientist where I could say it better, but you want to know something? The whole job that scientists do seems really boring. There's a lot of record keeping and stats and a lot of experiments that go nowhere. That doesn't sound like very much fun to me. But I love the learning aspect of it all. And I love taking a walk and talking about this stuff with you. Barbara Hall, 6585, says they are just now telling us that they did it. Yet I believe they had already done this years ago. Well, I don't know if they've been doing this for years, but I know for a fact that these 3 pups are like 7 months old. So my thought is, why the hell didn't they tell us this 7 months ago? But my realistic side tells me that there's probably a good chance that there is some sort of science publication out there where they probably did let people know. They just didn't make it a big national or big worldwide, news brief like they have now. What do you guys think, by the way? Do you think that this is scary? Do you think this is people playing God? Or do you think that this kind of is an exciting thing because it shows that if we're able to bring back creatures that have passed away, then it would seem to me that we could take anybody's DNA and bring back a carbon copy of them. Could you guys imagine if we went back and we retrieved Abraham Lincoln's DNA and literally had Abraham Lincoln Jr., imagine if we brought him back to life? That is crazy. But here's the thing, what if a country other than America that doesn't necessarily have the high ethics that we do, and who knows if we even have it, but what's to say some other country out there can't bring back, some sort of evil tyrant? That would be something else, wouldn't it? At JRS Kick says, or it might be Junior's Kick says, the question is, this is what they've let you know they've brought back. What have they brought back that we have no idea about? JRS Kick, they've probably got an island out there, might even be at the South Pole for all I know, where they might have some dinosaurs. I don't know if dinosaurs would do too well in the snow, but wherever you are on this planet, you have to get used to the different seasons, right? So I'm sure somewhere out there probably are some dinosaurs that were very much capable of living in Arctic-like conditions. I'm just tripping out because even if Jurassic Park isn't real, it's not a nonfiction story, I think we can agree it's probably a nonfiction story now. If they can bring back one animal, I have a feeling they could probably find a way to bring back a dinosaur if they haven't already. If you think they might have brought back dinosaurs already, definitely let me know down below. Casey Lee says, what's infuriating is that the vast majority of people are against this, yet we have zero say in what these scientists do when they're playing God. Yeah, if there's money to pay for the research and they're willing to pay these scientists well, why wouldn't you want to be a part of this? You got to figure for everybody that doesn't want to play the role of God, there's probably other people that are totally willing. And by the way, if you don't believe in God, if you have an atheistic viewpoint of the world, right, a worldview that doesn't have a God in it, then you look at this and you say, hey, we're bringing back life. It might have went extinct because it couldn't handle the ice age or it couldn't handle these certain conditions. But now we as humans can actually kind of be like a crutch to these animals, and we can make it where they do survive. And not only survive, we can make it where they thrive. I'm surprised they don't do this with cheetahs. How many times have you heard that all the cheetahs are mentally ill and they're all basket cases and they don't even make love to each other? Same with the panda bears. Have you heard about that? They actually show panda bears pornography, hoping that it'll make them get it on with other panda bears. ICXCNIKA says, fact is that the real direwolf is not back. It's just a counterfeit. So here's the thing. I think you're wrong. I think they actually did bring back the direwolf. I think that it might be 99.9% direwolf and 0.01% gray wolf or something. But basically speaking, the animal sounds like it's a spitting image of its ancestors. So I have a feeling they did bring back the direwolf. Arkansas Rebel says, can we all quit playing God? Steve Harrison says, I agree. How do we stop this runaway train? Very interesting. Extremely interesting. You know what else is interesting? Look how quick a 15 or 20 minute walk is. 15 and 20 minute walks don't necessarily do that much, but if you can expand your walk and make it a 30 or 45 minute walk, what a winning combination to become healthier. And now that I've told you about the direwolf, turn on Glenn Beck, turn on Joe Rogan, and watch a couple videos on the direwolf yourself. I think you'll find it fascinating. They really do look like little polar bear pups. But what I want to know is, just like these questions asked, what other animals are they hiding from us? Is this the way it works, where they show us 7 months down the line? Does that mean that they've already brought back the woolly mammoth and they just haven't told us yet? Would you freak out if all of a sudden you found out that they've got a handful of animals, including the dodo bird and the thylacine, that they have brought back to existence? I've also heard about this giant bear and these giant sloths that were like 8 or 10 feet tall. Could you imagine if they brought those things back as well? I know there's bears that are 10 feet tall, but I think they had bears once upon a time that were like 14 or 15 feet tall. Bring those bad boys back. That would be something else. I get excited about this stuff. I think we're going in the wrong direction with it because I don't think we should play God. But since we're already going in that direction, curiosity gets the best of me. I want to see what they're capable of doing now. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day.